We have a crisis in mental health. At least that's what people think. I mean, who isn't talking about this?
Our kids have been struggling for a while, and we can no longer wait to address youth mental health.
Some relationship between the amount of time people use Facebook and their mental health
can increase anxiety and depression in teenagers.
They go on to have higher rates of depression, higher rates of emotional fragility.
I must confess, I generally consider the most dangerous problems to be the ones nobody discusses. Because if no one's aware of a problem, it's quite difficult to solve. And that's all to say, at the very least, we are talking about mental health. But if you watch my last video, you'll probably know I hold a bit of skepticism in terms of how we broach this topic. I draw attention to the way we diagnose, the way we prescribe, and the way we enable. Too many diagnoses, too much medication, and way too much disorder pride. What are the engines of this mental health crisis? We need to view this issue from multiple angles that just so happen to jointly connect. I warn you, these are not the only perspectives. The issue is far more complex than it's ever made out to be. But hopefully, these points of view provide an interactive model as to why we're seeing what we are. So without further ado, social media.
Social media.
Social media.
When discussing social media, people tend to focus on a few key points. One, an unhealthy facility of social comparison. This is what happens when you're scrolling through Instagram, watching everyone portray their perfect lives. Bikini fit models, Bugatti posers, a constant feeling of inferiority. Two, we have a reduction in the depth and quality of genuine social relationships. Too many people are unfortunately relying upon online friends with the conviction that they can supply the same depth and connection as those in person. Both of these items, I concur, are relevant considerations regarding social media inflicted harm. However, there's one point I hear peddled most of all: diminished attention span. As the line goes, social media is most harmful because it has been reducing people's attention spans. Cue metaphor to that of a goldfish, which naturally brings us to TikTok. Now, I've heard TikTok called many things: a cyber attack, a national security threat, the collapse of Western civilization itself. And the question is, why? The answer is complicated. To the untrained eye, TikTok may just seem like some silly fad. But what has really struck me is the response to this platform from the powerful, with countries starting to ban the application. Even President Joe Biden referring to TikTok as it's
a matter of genuine concern.
What could be so dangerous about this silly platform compared to all of the others? Is it attention span? Or is it something else? These short videos, the tiny snippets you see within the TikTok format, are designed to capture your attention on loop, to place you in a sort of scrolling trance. You just keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling until you've spent an hour on the damn app and you don't even know where the time went. Now, I'm not a regular TikTok user myself, but I have been in situations that can only be described as trances, where I'm completely transfixed by stimulation provided. For instance, as a musician, I've spent hours in front of the piano just playing, improvising, time goes by, I don't even realize it's going by. I've had lots of similar excursions playing chess where I just don't want to stop playing. Continuing an activity becomes a path of least resistance. Now, you might see these kinds of activities as productive, wholesome hobbies, and for the most part, that's how I see them as well. However, what my hobbies have taught me is that there is a fine line between passion and obsession. These social media algorithms are designed to capture attention. They are designed to keep you and your mind transfixed on the product. And we view this as a negative because the more time you're there, the less time you're doing more productive, rewarding activities. But why does it have to be this way? Researchers have spent some time studying the concept of flow state. It's also described as someone being in the zone, aka the activity is so enjoyable, it's so stimulating, you achieve this level of ultimate focus, where you really can't think about doing anything else, and you can accomplish great things in little time. Remember that part in The Matrix where Neo goes through all of these training simulations and he just starts devouring hours upon hours of simulated kung fu training? To me, this is the perfect metaphor for flow, where time just passes by like nothing while Neo masters his craft. Now, I hope at this point you can see where we're going. The fact is, people scrolling through TikTok, at least in some cases, are focused. This talk of diminishing attention spans, I think, misses the point. The human attention span has always been small. It's a question of competition. What kind of material is packaged well enough to effectively compete for our attention. The problem with TikTok is not as much form, it's content.
TikTok, the app, is verifiably impacting almost an entire generation of the human species.
TikTok is the most vulgar, vapid, self-absorbed, and dehumanizing social media site in living memory.
TikTok is poisoning society.
It's a platform marketed to teenagers which incentivizes underage girls to wear like burlesque dancers in strip clubs.
Completely inappropriate environment for children.
Which brings us to this.
I've never attempted suicide or anything. I've never let it get that far.
Turning the pain from mental to physical work.
The spread of mental illness on TikTok is now a legitimate phenomenon. I've seen these videos documenting the increase in self-described cases of dissociative identity disorder.
A year ago, I believed in DID, but after seeing all these fakers on TikTok and the arguments presented by other psychologists who don't believe it's a real disorder, I'm convinced that they are all faking.
These are people who adopt a personality around having multiple identities trapped in the same body.
Do any other alters and systems have like a different accent than the body? Because I have like this northern accent and I don't feel comfortable with it because like people would make fun of me and be like, oh, you're not really, you know, from UK or anywhere.
My system's been really quiet lately, but last night something small but significant happened. I was video chatting with one of my friends and I was extremely upset because I've just got a lot of shit going on. And one of my littles came out and switched right before the end of the conversation.
It's even gotten to the point where certain individuals are seeking out operations on their bodies in order to cater to alter identities.
She will be going through gender reassignment because the alters or personalities in her system are male and she is not.
So I'm a member of a DID system, and for me right now that means that in the coming months I am going to be able to watch some of my best friends and some of my closest companions get the body of their dreams that matches their gender, that makes them feel happy, and in exchange I'm gonna have to give up my own.
This is just the tip of the iceberg. Hashtags featuring different conditions with millions of views, people self-diagnosing and more importantly self-identifying with these conditions as if they're hashtag so quirky. For all of the mentioning that mental illness is stigmatized, I'm sorry. Among this generation, I just don't see the stigma. People are embracing these identities, and they are being welcomed with large followings being amassed specifically due to mental conditions. Of course, we also need to define what stigma actually constitutes, because these days, it seems like the perception of a condition being stigmatized has nothing to do with bias against others getting treatment. No, people now believe stigma includes encouraging others to get treatment. Like, if you don't acknowledge my identity as X, Y, and Z as perfectly legitimate, you are invalidating my experience. As if people can't lack self-awareness to the point where they don't accurately assess their experience. It's like we're assuming everyone has full access to their subconscious, or perhaps enough people believe there is no subconscious. It's not like we're animals, right? Part of a chain of tens of millions of years of evolution. These kids are just naturally understanding and reinventing mechanisms inside themselves that are millions of years old. Yeah, that sounds right. To be clear, there is an opposite extreme where you just assume you know everyone's experience better than they do. But you would at least think if anyone is qualified to understand a child's experience, it would be the, quote, source of the biological derivative, the parents, and yet the path appears darker and darker. A poll from the Springtide Research Institute found that 6 in 10 Gen Z youth say that, quote, the adults in my life don't truly know how much I'm struggling with mental health. 6 in 10. This is why I think TikTok is a matter of genuine concern based on the era we're in and just who is being targeted. The target is our youth. With more than 1 billion active users monthly, a majority of whom under 25, this is an algorithmic mechanism that has firmly tapped into the young human mind beyond anything that has been created to this point. This is an incredibly powerful technology, which I believe has the potential to be tremendously beneficial. I'll explain later. But power doesn't come without risk. And when you have a platform designed by those connected with the government in direct competition with the US, while those same people have designed a completely separate application for their own citizens that promotes quite differently from TikTok.
Their version of TikTok, if you're under 14 years old, they show you science experiments you can do at home, museum exhibits, patriotism videos, and educational videos. And they also limit it to only 40 minutes per day. Now, they don't ship that version of TikTok to the rest of the world. So it's almost like they recognize that technology is influencing kids' development, and they make their domestic version a spinach version of TikTok, while they ship the opium version to the rest of the world.
Perhaps alarm bells should be going off. And at this point, I think the predators always lure the young, because the young don't have the wisdom to see what's happening, and the adults don't realize what's going on either until the trend is well underway and it's too late. This is a particularly effective technique when families are disconnected, as they are increasingly today. Without stellar intergenerational communication, parents don't understand their children, which to me sums up much of the issue with mental health and why the adults have kind of not been able to prevent any of this. Because children are in the midst of a massive societal transformation, technologically and socially, and it's happening so quickly that adults have lost track of what their children are experiencing. For instance, I'm 24, and I already feel this immense fissure between the experience of today's 12 and 13-year-olds and what I experienced just a decade ago. I can only imagine how large this gap has become for parents in their late 30s and 40s. And no, it's not as if intergenerational communication was previously easy. There's always going to be a level of disconnect. That's what teenage rebellion and quarreling is all about. If you're a parent of a teenager, I'm sure you've heard that classic, "Mom, you just don't understand what it's like." This can be remarkably frustrating to hear, especially when you're pretty sure you literally had the exact same experience. Nonetheless, every seemingly identical experience has been filtered through a cultural context. So as a parent, there's most likely some gap of understanding to fill. That gap is, coincidentally, becoming larger and larger, which brings us here.
They were being violent, they were being defiant, they were threatening the teachers.
One student was daily, almost by the hour, getting up, bullying kids, disrupting people, putting his hands on kids.
These are teachers within public education describing what they see as a crisis in classrooms.
And what have you seen and what have you heard?
Oh, I've seen screaming, yelling, spitting, hitting, throwing items.
Problems with self-control and emotional regulation. These sound a lot like the very same symptoms linked to excessive TikTok use. It sounds pretty bad. I started hearing this sentiment from teachers within traditional schooling environments who view an increasing unwillingness to learn through the lens of social media algorithms. It's like, we can't compete with these tech companies creating systems designed to capture human attention. These teachers are not alone, by the way. Here's a more recent video of a teacher in Georgia.
Lee Allen, and I'm the 2022 Gwinnett County Teacher of the Year. I'm leaving in hopes that I can regain the ability to do the job that I love. First issue at hand is student apathy and disrespect for school rules and norms. Next, cell phone use. Teachers cannot possibly compete with the billions of dollars tech companies pour into addicting people to their devices.
And then look at these comments underneath the video. Here's one in particular. Quote, "I've taught for more than 25 years. This poor teacher is trying. But honestly, he's sugarcoating the issues. In my experience, it's exponentially worse than he is communicating. There has been a mental, physiological, biological, and spiritual transformation of the human race. Yes, of course, there are exceptions. But the overwhelming majority of young people of all ages cannot learn because of these changes. Sadly, I'm out of ideas, but I agree with him. Until we admit the problem for what it is, we have no chance." Now, I personally wasn't around 25 years ago, but I'm at least cognizant enough to realize a lot has changed. A spiritual transformation, though? Like, that sounds pretty serious, doesn't it? And now, most of the time when confronted with claims as grandiose as this, I tread lightly. A true species evolution likely doesn't run its course in 25 years. Biologically, we're basically identical as we were 25 years ago, as we were 250 years ago, as we were 25,000 years ago. What has changed quite significantly is the world in which we live. Humans are biologically responding to a completely new set of circumstances, one that includes the existence of powerful algorithms intent on bending the will of our children to its lucrative reward system. We've harnessed these algorithms predominantly at this point as pure entertainment mechanisms. Most of the engaging content created is entertainment-based. Now, there's nothing wrong with pure entertainment in moderation. The problem is if it's becoming a substitute, or in fact a distraction, preventing children from learning anything from school. To be clear, I'm not someone who claims the education system is teaching useful skills or knowledge, but you would think that an effective system would at least instill a tiny bit of general knowledge inside the vast majority of students. But then, take a look at this.
I'll give you $1 if you can name any continent.
I don't know.
Name the continents.
What the f? No? Bitch, like, isn't it like Alaska?
You got Alaska, New Jersey.
Hawaii?
Yeah. What's 6 times 7? Yeah.
48.
What does YES spell?
Y-E-S?
Yeah.
Y-E-S. I don't know.
Who did we gain our independence from?
Korea.
I'll give you this dollar if you can name one continent.
USA.
Spell Mississippi.
You know, there's Giuseppe, so I'm gonna base it off that. Giuseppe.
The biggest number that you can think of.
100. I don't know.
Now, it's very important that you listen to what I'm going to say next, because accepting this next statement is very important to ushering in a successful era of education. And that is, the way education is currently being conducted cannot compete against these algorithms. From my perspective, these teachers want to reclaim an era of education from the past, but unfortunately, they are both misunderstanding the problem and misconstruing a solution. The problem is that organized education is being done badly, and it has been done badly for quite some time. Those clips I just showed you are only the most recent examples. This has been going on for decades. You had Jay Leno conduct similar social experiments way back when.
What country did we fight in the Revolutionary War?
France.
Who said, give me liberty or give me death?
Cock.
So education has been dealing with these issues of student retention for a while. So you see, that student disruption, the lack of emotional regulation, they need to be treated as signs that this public school system has reached its tipping point. It's not working. It has really never worked. With results like these, what are we spending the money on? As far as I'm concerned, what is currently taking place in public education in the United States of America is a complete and utter waste of time. To make sure it's 100% clear how I feel about this, we'd be better off if public schools, K through 12, became predominantly natural environments, 90% dedicated to outdoor socialization time. That's how badly we're doing with the state of human connection. In other words, recess, 90% recess. I mean it. Adult supervision would be there. We would, of course, have adult interaction with students engaged in outdoor play. But Common Core, constant youth testing, it's all pointless. I realize this would barely even begin to solve the issues with education. But we can't even start the education process if the majority of the generation has the soul sucked out of them. Okay, that's a great speech, Nolan. But what about the, education component beyond recess, like reading and writing? So much emphasis is placed on traditional forms of processing information. A common idea I've heard discussed is the dwindling number of books people are reading. In 1999, a series of Gallup polls found that the average American read 18.5 books per year. By 2021, the number has dropped to 12.6. There's quite a bit of fluctuation during that period, but the numbers on their own do sound somewhat alarming. But I'm going to pose a slightly different framing. Certainly, we need to place emphasis on reading and especially writing. However, these days, books are not the only means of learning. And more importantly, when it comes to competing for attention, books do not cut it against the algorithms. The whole point of visual content is to be able to install ideas in a more profound, compact kind of way. Videos have the ability to express remarkably complicated, nuanced concepts for a general audience and do so within a package that is succinct, condensed, and replayable. That element of replayability is really key, considering it allows viewers to rehearse concepts that are not as quickly understood. Rehearsal is a critical element of education that is widely underestimated across all levels. You don't just review a topic once and then it magically transfuses into your mind. Learning requires consistent repetition. While I don't have experience with TikTok content, I do have significant experience with YouTube's, and I can firmly assert I recall content significantly more for videos I've watched 2, 3, even 4 times. It's not as if I've sought out these videos multiple times. The same videos can be recommended repeatedly. Think of your brain as a computer, a very elaborate but, let's face it, relatively unimpressive computer. We have a lot to learn about the brain still and learning, but preliminary research on human short-term memory has shown it can store anywhere from 5 to 9 objects or items of data at once, like bits. To give you some context, you think of a common computer and how many megabytes of data can download every second. Our brain is capable of downloading thousandths of this size at any one time for short-term storage. And the only way the information becomes learned within long-term memory is if we rehearse that temporarily stored data and encode it, or we have previously existing schema that allow us to embed the short-term data more easily within a web of knowledge. Yes, it's hard to impart any kind of knowledge in 10 to 15 seconds, but imagine a string of 10 to 15 second videos that was neatly organized into a well-designed educational and stimulating package, sequenced properly, with appropriate repetition, while even allowing for an interactive AI that could effectively respond to comments and questions. On the point, at the beginning of this video, I spent time introducing the concept of flow, and I did so with clear intention. Technological algorithms, even like the one found on TikTok, are spectacular mechanisms for achieving this state of flow. You combine this with something like virtual reality and create educational products that have real-world application. This could be revolutionary stuff, but we need to create the packages that push our youth into these better flow states so that information and even skills can be processed and downloaded more efficiently, like Neo in the Matrix. Ultimately, this is only the beginning of our educational discussion on this channel. It's a topic I deeply care about, and our current models of education right now, paired with all of the algorithmic influences of the modern era, are leading young people down a miserable path. But for those of you who don't think there are any bright spots at the end of this tunnel, I wanted to offer an alternative way of viewing our current strange reality. If you haven't come to terms with the reality we are entering into, this all might sound terrifying. I still believe we need to limit the use of this technology more than what we are currently doing to ensure we maintain a connection with the physical world and our relationships. But this is where we're heading, and we can either harness the tools well or watch them continue to cripple future generations. TikTok, the time is ticking.